Here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
And welcome to another fabulous episode of Retrovaniacs. Before we get started, I have a little bit of housekeeping to do. Last episode was Airzonk, and at the end of the episode we said, we're going to do Kid Icarus for the Nintendo. But we didn't realize at the time that this episode you're listening to now will happen in October. Last year we liked to do some horror-themed episodes. We did Mutant League Football and the Splatterhouse series. So this year we're going to do the same thing, two kind of horror or monster-themed episodes. So this week, instead of Kid Icarus, which will be back in November, we're going to do Monster Party for the Nintendo. But before we get into that game, Billy, what have you been playing since last time?
What have I been playing? Well, I was out of town last week for my anniversary. And many of you would say, well, that means you didn't play anything. Well, you're wrong. I pack a system with me, just in case, when we inevitably run out of things to talk about and hate being in closed quarters together. I will escape to another room to play something. And I have been playing on that BioShock collection that came out, which is, it's 1 and 2 and Infinite, which I guess is the entire collection. And, and 1 and 2 have been upscaled quite a bit. I think they put a new coat of paint on it. They've added in some things graphics-wise here and there, and they're both just amazing. And they've really done a great job. I think it's probably the best job I've seen from one of these collections where they take a couple games from a series and try to put them back out for the new generation of consoles. This one has certainly. They play like brand new games. If you have never played them before, I could not recommend it enough. And if you have played them before, you won't feel like it's just a retread and you're just spinning your wheels playing them again. I definitely recommend it. And I also I picked up a subscription to that PS Now, which is on the PS4. Is that thing that lets you play all the PS3 games they have in their catalog. I guess they're ever expanding catalog, and I picked it up for a few reasons. Just a couple games here and there I had never played. I never got the chance to play. I picked up the PS3 pretty late in its life cycle, so I've been playing some stuff on there, and it was the RPG Eternal Sonata that wrote me in, because I've got to play that thing all the way through.
Eternal Sonata is one that I had on Xbox because I don't have a PS3.
Yes.
And I maybe made it 2 hours in. Now, I tried to get into the game several times, each time about 2 hours in. I don't know why it didn't grab me, because everyone talked about that it was, a fairly good RPG, and I liked the setting. I thought it was interesting, but it just, something about it I didn't care for, and I don't know exactly what that was.
I really enjoyed it. I like the combat system on there. It's turn-based, but there's some maneuverability out there on the field. But yeah, I had it on the 360. Played. I got maybe about 4 or 5 hours in, and I enjoyed it. But I guess just too much new stuff came around, and I put it down, and I never came back to it.
So how much is a subscription to PS Now?
It seems I put this off for a long time because I just didn't think it was worth it. And and early on I didn't think it had a lot of good games to it. It's about I think it's $20 a month. I'm coming off my week trial now. I think I'm going to keep it at least a month or two to kind of play through the games I want to play through, and then from there I'll just kind of see what they add. I can't see it being a service that I permanently keep, but I mean, paying $20 a month to play through as many games as you can isn't that bad. So I'm going to hold on to it for a little bit, and I recommend it. And they've got Jeopardy on there, and Wheel of Fortune.
Sold.
Well, that's worth $20 a month by itself. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, since last time, we did Airzonk last episode, and it got me thinking. I haven't played a good realistic shooter. Well, not realistic because it's a space shooter, but you know what I mean. Not a cartoony shooter in quite a long time. So conveniently, the PlayStation Store had a sale for Darius Burst Chronicle Saviors for the Vita. Now, I kept looking at this game. I like the Darius series. I had G Darius on PlayStation and thought it was great. And I was like, oh, man, awesome, a new Darius game. And then I saw it was $40. And I thought, okay, hold on. There's something I'm missing. Because it's basically an upgraded port of a PSP game that was a Darius. That was just Chronicle Saviors, I think. So I was like, why would this be $40? And I just couldn't bring myself to pay $40 for a shooter. And that makes me feel kind of bad because I love these games. But at the same time, I have to feed a family. So not spending $40 on a shooter didn't make me feel too bad. But it was on sale for $16, which I'm sure some people would argue is still too much money for a shooter. But I disagree. So I picked that up, and I've been playing that pretty much nonstop. It's a good Gradius style, 2D side-scrolling shooter. That's been fun. But the other thing I played pretty much since the moment we finished the last episode until I finished it is I played the Abe's Oddworld New and Tasty remake on the Wii U that I had gotten a while ago, and I thought, yeah, I love Abe's Odyssey. I'll get back into it. I'd never finished the original. I bought the original the day it came out on PlayStation. I loved the game, but because much like on a role-playing game where you don't want to finish the game until you've got all the best items and all the best things, unless I got through a level where I knew I saved every single Mudokan, or Mudokan, however you pronounce it, I couldn't go on. So I never finished the original game. I got as far as to getting outside of the factory and started going through the wild area, but I knew I had missed some, so I kept starting over and over again to find these harder to find and harder rooms where they were captured. You had to save them. So I never finished it. So finally, the New and Tasty came out. I picked it up because I want to support Oddworld. I love that series. I know it's kind of installed for a long time, but apparently they're going to redo basically all the games in the series and then make some new ones. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, I played nothing but Abe's Oddworld and then Darius Burst Chronicle Saviors. And I have to say that Oddworld still holds up really, really well. And the remake, getting rid of the room by room that the original had and turning it into more of a standard side-scroller, actually works really, really well. I think it's a much more playable game while still being incredibly hard at times.
Yeah, I beat that back when it came out on PlayStation 4, and it's a great remake. I think it's actually better than the original. Definitely in agreement with you. Now that it scrolls, it feels, I don't know, it feels much more responsive than what it used to. It used to feel very much like, Flashback or Out of This World, and it still kind of has that, but it's definitely a lot more responsive with how you move around and get around, and just faster overall. But what did you remember the original much at all? Like, do the changes that they made in the remake bother you at all? The
changes don't bother me. There's more. I'm gonna just keep calling them Mudokons. There's more Mudokons to save in the remake. There's like 290 or something like that, where the original only had 100. So in the original, if you saved 50 or more, you got the good ending. I think there was like an extra little bit if you saved all 100, which I clearly didn't do. And then if you save less than 50, you got the bad ending, which is still, it's basically the same ending. You just get an extra scene with the good ending. But I really, this one, because of the extra characters, I thought I had saved everybody because it was everyone I remembered from the original. And then when I got to a certain point, I realized, wait a minute, there's way more in this game, which I didn't mind at all. And I think I didn't notice any changes because I wasn't, I love the original, but I don't remember every single room. So maybe they added characters or took out, not characters, but added monsters and took out monsters. But I think generally this version flowed way better than the original.
It does, and they actually took out not large chunks, but decent chunks of the stages from before. They're actually, it's a smaller game than what it used to be, and I think that actually, for once, makes it a better game. I think just making that game, it's kind of just smaller and easier to navigate. It really worked out for it. I really enjoyed playing that. I can't even go back and play the original now because that version is so good.
No, on the original, there's the levels. Once you get out of the factory and escape, then you do the trials, and one of them has you riding this kind of horse kind of animal that has some long sections where literally all you do is jump timing.
Yes.
Was that longer in the original?
It's been a long time since I got to that part, but it seemed like it was. I mean, everything about that game. I don't know if it was just because it went screen by screen or what. Everything about the original game seemed like it was way longer on the original, to where this one, I was just breezing through everything. I beat it in 8 hours or something.
Yeah, I finished it pretty quick. I mean, for me, I only get an hour or so every couple of days to play something and actually focus on it. So, I did finish it, probably about 10 hours total. But I can't say I wouldn't play it again. I loved it. It was great.
Oh, yeah, it's great. I think they've actually got the something else. They put out like a DLC or a standalone something else for it, and I can't quite remember what it's called or what it is, but I've been meaning to check that out and play it.
Well, Soulstorm is next for them. It's a remake of Abe's Exodus. But I don't know if it's a remake or reimagining. It sounds like they're actually changing a lot to it, but until it's out, which isn't until the end of 2017, I guess we won't know. And I know they did HD ports of both Stranger's Wrath, which I have beaten, and Munch's Odyssey, which I have a copy of, and I'm just starting to play now because I was so into this last one. But I hadn't finished it, so I don't know if the HD port's worth it or not. I have it on Xbox, the original Xbox, so I'll play it on that. But Jeremy, what have you been playing since last episode?
Well, I've really only been playing what Billy mentioned, which was the BioShock collection. And if you've already got the original games on Steam, then they just kind of give you those games in your library as well. It's a whole different game. It just doesn't replace the original BioShock. But I haven't played BioShock and BioShock 2 since they came out, and I'm not as I don't remember these things as well, or how the game looked, especially how it ran back then. And I put this one in, and I was like, this looks just about how I remember it. And I think this goes a long way in showing just how effective rose-tinted glasses can be, because I literally remembered this game looking exactly like it does now, back when I played it on the 360. And my girlfriend and Billy were very quick to point out that this is a vastly improved game over its original. And so I went back and actually watched a few videos and to see what it used to look like. And I was like, Jesus Christ. I mean, this is... I remember this game looking how it is now, not this. It's very janky from back when it was released, especially the first game. Ran terribly in parts, and to see just how much they changed it was really cool to kind of go through those first few areas and experience it all over again. But it just kind of amazed me that I was like, yeah, this is exactly how I remember this game looking. And I think a lot of gamers, when they don't play a game for so long, or they played it back when something was fresh and new, that they just remember it in a very fond light. They don't see any of those bad technical flaws because they weren't looking for them back then. They just remember it looking amazing. Kind of like how I remember in Zelda 64, the first time you got out in that field. And
Mansion of Hidden Souls.
Yeah. I don't know if that's
back
one.
then we remember these things looking so amazing. And like I said, that first time in Zelda 64, when you step out in that field, I was like, nothing will ever look this good ever, after this. And, I remember it just being this wide open, amazing expanse. And I recently played that, the remaster on the 3DS not too long ago. And I was like, even on that, even being improved like that, I was like, man, this looks kind of awful. This is not what I remember it being. And it kind of sucks sometimes to play those games again and see just, how off your memories are of those. And it kind of ruins it sometimes. But, at the same time, it's always nice to know that, hell, I remembered... I could remember playing that and being so astonished with something that simple. But now I'm off on a tangent, and I think BioShock the collection is great. I know there's some people that don't like the changes that they did, some of the artwork and the various things that they added. They're kind of like, it's not the original's look. It kind of looks off, and I'm not that big of I'm not that hardcore about things. It looks nice, it runs well. I'm happy with it. And, if you like BioShock, like Billy said, go ahead and grab it. It's a really great collection.
I think that happens a lot with a lot of series. Mega Man's the one that really pointed out to me when you said that you remember looking like it did. When Mega Man 8 came out for the PlayStation, that was the biggest complaint when I worked in retail that everyone's like, this looks just like the old Mega Mans. I'm like,
Oh,
no, it
yeah.
doesn't. It looks like you remember the old Mega Mans, but go home, play Mega Man 2, and then look at 8. 8 is a much clearer and much more, actual version of what you remembered 2 looking like, but 2 didn't look like this. I think BioShock's kind of the same. I thought BioShock looked beautiful, but I'm sure that if I played through the original now and then looked at the HD remake, I would be like, "Whoa, this is terrible."
It's a big difference, and that actually happened recently with when Fallout 4 released. They showed the first trailer or gameplay of Fallout 4, and there was just this chorus of internet forum posts of being like, "It just looks like Fallout 3." Like, no, it doesn't. Trust me. I just got done playing Fallout 3 not too long ago. This does not look like Fallout 3. This is a substantial upgrade over that game. But like I said, people just remember things how they want to remember them, and it can definitely hurt your perception of things that unless you go back and play them again and see exactly what it looked like, you can kind of cloud your judgment.
Well, it's also a testament to those games and their art styles to say that
Oh, yeah.
a new version of that game you would remember looking exactly like it is a good thing. But you know what? We've talked way too long about things that are not this episode's game. So let's dive directly into a game that has not had an HD remake. Monster Party for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, neither of you had played Monster Party until this, for this episode, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
Yeah, this is another one that I had. I don't know how we ended up with this one because everything about this game would lead me to not believe I should own it. First off, it was released at kind of towards the end of the Nintendo, 1989. So I guess right before Super Nintendo came out in 1991, I think. So not the end of the system, but by the time that I wasn't just buying any old game, there were plenty of Nintendo games that were probably better than Monster Party looked like it would be. Monster Party came out from Bandai, who up to then, the only games I had played from Bandai were Dragon Power, which was a terrible Dragon Ball game that wasn't even called Dragon Ball in this country, and then Jekyll and Hyde, which I don't remember at all, but the art was terrible on the box. The box for this is just a bunch of poorly drawn monsters. I mean, it's not a terrible box, I suppose, but it's not something looking at it now that I would have been like, I need that right now. And especially knowing that it wasn't Capcom or Konami or a company that put this out that I was already in love with. I don't know how I ended up with Monster Party because everything on the box, everything about the publisher would have led me to not even try this, but I had it, and I remember it very fondly. So I was very excited that you guys have never played this before. It's got a following. People love it because it's so different. And I think you can agree it's different.
No, I know. I just knew how crazy it was. I mean, that's really about all. I've never actually played it. I've seen a few little internet videos of it, but the reason why I really pushed for it to be on the podcast was just how absolutely insane this game is. I mean, it is just a fever dream of a game, and if you experience it for just that, just to see it, I think it's worth it. But I don't. I never played it. Never experienced the magic of Monster Party for myself.
No, and that's quite a bit of magic to experience. I had no clue about this game growing up. I've never seen this game.
No, I didn't either.
And up to when, even after you mentioned, oh, hey, how about we do Monster Party? I still didn't know what it was. To be honest, I thought for some reason we were doing Monster in My Pocket.
I would also do that, but that's not what this episode is.
That's why I thought. I said, "Wow, that's an odd choice," but I'm game for it anyway. But no, it's not until I looked up Monster Party. I was like, "Well, this is not what I thought," and yeah, this is something that I'm not going to say yet my standing on it. I will say it is a spectacle.
It's different. It is different than anything else you'll play on the system. Although at first, doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be a game that you're going to remember for being so different. So, like any other Nintendo game, you turn it on, it starts up, it gives you this little story. You're a boy coming home from baseball, your name is Mark, and you meet up with some sort of alien demon gargoyle thing named Bert, because all good monsters have a name like Bert. Mm-hmm. And he says, I need you to help me. We're going to go to my planet, and you're going to help me save my planet. and he merges with you somehow. They show in the little video, just basically it looks like both of you kind of coming together and kind of blurring in the middle, and then the game starts. The first
What a
level,
story.
and it's, what story do you need for an NES game? Honestly, the fact that there was a story in there other than just starting in the first level like most games, I'll give them credit for that. They tried to have some sort of little story built in. First level starts, and it's just any other Nintendo game. You start on the left side of the screen, you walk to the right, scrolls to the right. You have one attack, which is you swing your bat at monsters that come up, and you jump with the other button. I mean, it's very basic and straightforward.
I'm sorry. Let me. At any point, this swing, this primary attack, it's like a very bizarre. This is not a well-trained baseball player. He's swinging from the hip. At any point in time, did you ever pause it and just think it looks like this guy is just swinging his junk all over the place,
Honestly,
fighting off these enemies?
by the end of the game, I would have been fine with that. Wouldn't have had a problem with it at all. But I think at the very first level, if I first turned it on and that was the attack, I probably would have been a little suspect of what this game was. But
The only reason I knew it was a bat was because he said it. It was in the introduction. Otherwise I would have no clue what he's swinging there.
it's a bat. It's not his junk, although it could be. It would probably be the same level because you're right. He's not swinging the bat very well. He's not a professional. He's playing elementary school baseball. So you got to give Mark a break here. But he does have a bat. He's actually good enough with it to hit things back. So there's certain enemies when you're on the main screen. They'll shoot they look almost like little guys in suits, and they'll shoot javelins at you. You can hit the javelins back at them. Hitting their own attacks back at them does a lot more damage than using your bat. So the first, the basic parts of the level is just a standard jumping side scroller with some things you have to fight. As you kill these enemies, you'll get either hearts that give you more life back. You have a fairly large life bar that's across the entire bottom of the screen, but you also take a lot of damage from almost everything. Or the other thing they'll drop is pills, which is kind of suspect in a kid's game, but that's okay. You get these pills, you eat them, and you'll turn into Bert, the flying gargoyle that you met at the beginning. Bert
just like real life.
Just like real life, or at least you believe you are, and then you wake up naked in a NASCAR race. But instead, you fly around as Bert, and instead of having a bat, you have a projectile that you shoot out of your mouth. It's a much stronger attack than your regular bat, and it makes it much easier to hit things before they hit you, because a lot of the monsters in this game only do melee attacks. But conveniently, because it's a Nintendo game, they also do things like just go left and right in a very small path and don't actually do anything else.
Can we start complaining about this game yet?
No, not yet. Let me finish explaining the mechanics of the.
All right. The only thing I was going to say about that, the when you're playing the two different people, Mark and Bert, Mark, with just his bat, he has a very, very short range of attack when you swing that. And, the whole thing of hitting projectiles back at enemies and bosses, it's a very large part of the game because those, like you said, those projectiles that you can shoot back at them do a lot more damage than just swinging your bat at them. I mean, one projectile can kill one of them, or you'll just be swinging at them for like 5 or 6 times until they eventually die with just your bat. And that was the first thing that really just kind of, I was like, oh man, I don't like to do that, and it's kind of awkward with how you do it. But it's a huge part of the game, and it's definitely worth mentioning.
So while you're going through the level, though, it's not just a standard side scroller, because you're not just going left to right to get to the end of the stage and fight a big boss or anything. Instead, there are doors in all the stages, and in the doors, they take you to a separate room that may or may not have a unique boss fight. You will see these characters only once, except for one exception that you'll see twice, but everyone else you see only that one time, only in that one door, only in that one level. And those bosses are generally the reason anyone would ever want to play Monster Party.
I'm going to tell you. Yeah, I was wading through this thing, and it just... the enemies in the main stage, as you're going along, are uninspired. There's a guy in a suit, there are some legs. Later on you encounter some other things here and there. I went through that first door, the first of probably hundreds of doors I entered in this game. And there was the fucking Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors. It was right there. And at this point, I became very hopeful that this game was just going to be a monster roll call of just, monsters throughout various films, and just a lot of odd stuff they're going to throw at you. And as we go along, we'll find out they did that to an extent. And
Yes.
yeah, going into those doors became pretty exciting because you didn't know what small, boss fight you were going to get into.
Right.
I think they did that to the extent that they just ran out of monsters and just started putting in whatever the hell they could think of.
Oh, yeah.
You'll fight some onion rings before it's over with.
I'm not certain they're onion rings and not calamari, but the point is you do fight food items at one point. But yes, all the bosses in the game are the reason that Monster Party has, I don't want to say the status that it has. I think it's a cult classic of video games. That's probably a safe statement. Because these rooms with the bosses are, from the start to finish, the most amusing bosses you'll ever find, the most bizarre choices of bosses in some cases. And there actually is a good level of mechanic in each of these bosses that I haven't seen in other games at the time. I hadn't seen anything else like this in other games. Now it's probably not so out of place, but it is almost 30 years after this has been released. So the first room you go into, as Billy mentioned, is you fight a giant plant. The giant plant is the first time, if you're not Bert and you have to be Mark and take it on, is where the only way you can hurt this boss is to shoot its projectiles back at them by hitting it with your bat. And I like that. Now, apparently I'm the only one on this podcast that likes that, but I do like that as a mechanic.
I like that when it's done, every once in a while, but this whole, like, almost every single boss in this game is basically hitting projectiles back at them to damage them. And as long as I was actually Mark on that first boss, and it certainly doesn't take just a few.
No, that's my only complaint, is that it's not, in a Zelda game, this would have been 3 hits. Yeah. But it's not a Zelda game, it's Monster Party, so it's about 35 hits.
Yes.
Yeah, and the problem is the projectiles have to come at you at just the right angle, and you can't really coax the computer into throwing it at you at that angle. I mean, you can get in a spot that worked before, but yeah, it's not like every projectile that comes at you, you have the chance to hit back and do damage. I mean, you have to sit there through numerous projectiles before you get a hit in. And yeah, like Jeremy said, I don't mind this when it's brief, when it's every now and then, and to add to that, yeah, like everybody else said, I don't mind it when it doesn't take several minutes at a time on each boss that you're doing this on.
Well, the good thing is that it's fairly easy to transform into Bert. If you're just in the level and you actually kill everything as you go to a door, there's a really good chance after that first door that you'll probably be able to be Bert instead. And I think he makes a lot of the boss fights much, much easier, even if you're just going to play it as if you were going to tank the encounter and just take all the hits they get and just fire over and over again while you stand there like a dick. With Bert, it's actually very doable. And that means even some of the fights that you may or may not like doing with the bat, there's a mummy later on that's an awful boss to do with Bert. There are definitely bosses you'll want to do as Mark as opposed to Bert. The very last boss of the game is the best example of that. I could not imagine doing that effectively with Bert, and Mark does it much, much easier. But we're not even close to the end of the game. We're still on the first level. So you get about halfway through the first level, and this is where, as a kid, I knew this game, you get to the first boss, it's a plant. I didn't realize it was supposed to be Audrey 2 until later when I realized what this game was supposed to be. I just thought it was a weird plant that spit bubbles at you. But you get about halfway through the first level, and there's this big tree. And as soon as you cross the big tree, the whole world kind of transforms into like evil world, hell world. The things that used to be trees are now, sticks with faces on them, and the world's much darker. There's blood instead of water.
This is clearly where they got the inspiration for Silent Hill.
Honestly, I mean, I don't think it's the inspiration for Silent Hill, but again, if you were a kid
clearly
in 1989, this was pretty amazing. I mean,
this transition here got an audible. I don't know if it was a excitement or it wasn't a groan.
An audible groan.
It got an audible, positive noise out of me.
I thought, and even playing through this time, I got to that point, and I'd kind of forgotten that it happens, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that's pretty great, you know. And the faces really are what does it to me. The faces on sticks really do look kind of scary, almost melty. I like those. Those are great. So
There's
yeah,
some really like crazy dark imagery in this game. Like for an NES game, it's pretty crazy. Like some of the weird satanic shit they throw in here.
Well, it's a lot of demons. It's a lot of things from folklore, especially Japanese folklore, which we wouldn't have known in 1989. I still don't know now. But doing any sort of reading on this game, there's a lot of these bosses specifically, and also some of the monsters you see in the levels that are drawn specifically from Japanese folklore, things we would never know. In the first level, they look almost like kind of like dogs with a weird head on the top. They're supposed to be these Japanese demons that are dogs with human faces. We wouldn't have known those demons. I don't remember their name now, but at the time I was just like, yeah, these look kind of like dinosaur dogs. I don't know what these are supposed to be, and you jump over them, no big deal. But there's a lot of that in the game, a lot of Japanese folklore and things that we may or may not get. There's also things that are very clearly homages to things we do know. There are characters in some of those look kind of like Jason, but they can't be too much like Jason, so they have a hockey mask, but they also wear this kind of umpire gear. but it's clearly supposed to be Jason. There's a lot of these little things in the game, which is why it's a monster party, and I do enjoy that. So
I really enjoyed the homage to fried shrimp.
Yes,
that was quite the boss.
We'll get back to the fried shrimp, because that's honestly, anyone that's played this game before will remember that boss. If nothing else in the game, you remember that you fought a giant fried shrimp. But we'll get there in a few minutes. But the point of each level is to go into all these doors that you need to find all the bosses in the game, in the level. There's normally 3. Sometimes there's only 2 or 1. There's 1 only in level 6, but normally there's 3 bosses in each level. If you go into each door, you'll find them all. Once you've beaten all 3 bosses, you get a key. You take that key to the very end of the level. Otherwise, you can skip all these doors and get to the very end of the level, and you'll get to a door that you can't open. And then you have to backtrack. At least they'll let you backtrack, but you're not going to. You're going to hit the reset button, and you're going to start over. So essentially, you never skip a door, and unfortunately, that means some of these doors are empty. I know, Jeremy, you ran into on the first level after you fight the plant. The next boss of the first level is a giant spider, but the giant spider is unfortunately already dead when you show up.
It's already dead,
and it just
I
says,
believe he
"I am
literally
dead."
says, "I am dead,"
and then it gives you your question mark, which proves that you beat that boss. All bosses drop a question mark once you finish them. The question mark is one of 3 things. It is either extra health, just like a normal heart you'd pick up, or it's another Bert power up where you turn into Bert, or lengthen your Bert transformation if you're already Bert, or it's points. There is a score at the bottom of the screen that I guarantee not one person has ever looked at, but it's there.
No.
So if you get through all the bosses, you'll go in every door, find the bosses, get to the last door. That's how you'll get a key and you'll get to the next level. And there's 8 levels total in the game. They're all, thankfully, I think, different enough from each other, graphic-wise, that it's worth seeing every level. There's not just, here's 8 great caves. I mean, it's 8 levels that are all pretty much different from each other, while still feeling like the same game. You go through the first level, which is kind of the introduction. It's kind of a woodsy sort of level. And then the sewers. I wrote all these down here in order. Sewers. Let me edit. So you go through a forest, which is the one that has the evil transformation. That's the first level. And then sewers, some underground caves, a pyramid level, because every NES game needs a pyramid level.
Oh, yeah.
Like a kind of an outdoor forest with water. There wasn't water in the first forest, and that's actually a pretty tough level. The Haunted Mansion. The Haunted Mansion is level 6. It is the level that only has 1 boss and is incredibly difficult. We'll go back to that level. A tower, which is the only level that goes, instead of left to right, from bottom to top. And then the last level, which is some sort of, I don't know if it's heaven, but you're up in the clouds. Call it what you want it to be. And then that's the end of the game. The 8 levels, you fight a final boss at the end of all 8 levels, and you've finished Monster Party. But all of them have the same general mechanic. Go through all the doors, fight these bosses that are different every time, and have some interesting or not interesting mechanics, but at least they look interesting. And then get the key, get out to the end, finish the level. The bosses are what make this game, in any way, worth talking about. We've already talked about the boss that was dead when you show up and he just gives you your question mark. That's fine. The second level is where the sewers is where the game really starts throwing stuff at you. That's the level that has the shrimp encounter that Jeremy mentioned earlier. You walk into the room, and all bosses say something. Every boss will say, the first boss says, "Hey, baby," or "Look out, baby," or something like that. But again, knowing it's supposed to be Audrey 2, that kind of makes sense. If you've seen Little Shop of Horrors, that's the kind of thing a giant talking plant that sings and then eats you would probably say.
Yes.
But when you get to the second level, that's where you run into a few things that don't make any sense. And the shrimp say, I honestly think they say, "Look out," or or "Let's go," or something ridiculous. And then a giant shrimp that is 3 times the size of your character hops around the screen while you try to dodge it and hit it with your bat or shoot it as Bert. Once you kill that giant shrimp, it then turns into what is arguably an onion ring, although I think knowing that the first was definitely a shrimp, maybe a calamari ring. Doesn't matter. It's fried food.
Yeah, we could argue about this all night.
It's a round. It's a circle. Looks like an onion ring.
It's breaded.
It's breaded, whatever it is. And then the last thing, again, if you stay with seafood, I think is supposed to be scallops, but if not, it looks like a sign. I don't know what it is, a signpost with 3 pieces on it. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be scallops. Doesn't matter. You fight 3 things that are definitely fried food. There's no explanation as to why, and then you get your question mark. That was the point in the game, as a kid especially, that I thought, this game is insane. Why did I just fight fried shrimp?
You were talking about how this stuff is supposed to have, definitely a lot of Japanese meaning and things like that. But like I said earlier, a lot of this stuff just comes up like they were just drunk at a bar late at night and just writing shit down on a napkin that they could throw into this game, because that's really all I can come up with after seeing some of these bosses. I mean, you've definitely got a good amount of classic monsters like giant snakes and crazy statues and stuff like that.
There's a
but when the
pumpkin
guy
monster.
shows up with the electric guitar and he's running back and forth the screen at you, you just gotta wonder, this has nothing to do with anything. Why is this here?
Yeah, there's definitely monsters that I don't understand where they would have come from. The punk rock character you mentioned earlier, the guitar player, was definitely one. The shrimp, I don't understand. I don't know where that would have come from. There can't be a legend about spooky shrimp. There can't be. I would have heard it. Everyone would know that legend. It's that bad. There's no reason for it to be there. There's a cat at one point in a box that just throws smaller cats at you. I don't know why. Doesn't matter. But there's definitely some other mechanics in those bosses that I actually thought were pretty interesting at the time. Did you guys get to the boss that says, "Watch my dance"?
Yes.
There's 2 zombies, and they say, "Watch my dance," and you get there, and did you try attacking that boss first?
Of course.
And you'll attack that boss for the rest of time. If you actually attack the boss, it melts down to the ground, and then it comes back up and continues to not do anything that in any way is harmful to you, and dances. And you can hit them 100 times, and they'll do that over and over again until
and
eventually.
That's exactly what I did. I hit that fucker 50 times because, this game, the very first boss, you had to lay about 30 of those fucking bubbles right into his face to kill him. So I just figured, that's what I was supposed to be doing here. I figured I was lucky that I wasn't taking damage from anything. I thought it glitched. But then after a while, I went to YouTube and literally you just watch them dance for a solid minute until they're done.
Long.
And that's
it's so long. And after they're done with their dance, they melt on the floor. And you get your question mark and you move on. That's one of those bosses that when I got to them, I thought, I wonder if Billy and Jeremy got to this boss. I haven't gotten any angry emails yet. I bet they have not gotten here yet.
No, I had to look this one up too. As a kid, how did you do this as a kid? I mean, what did you do?
It's hard to remember that far back because again, I had this when this was a new game. It's 25 years ago. I don't remember. I'm sure at one point one of us would have had to just stand there. My brother and I were both, heavy Nintendo players. And I don't mean fat. I mean, we played a lot of Nintendo. We weren't fat until way later in life. But now, at the time, we were not. And we played a lot of Nintendo, so one of us would have figured this out. One of us would have said, fine, we're going to sit here and watch this dumb dance. And then it would have gotten through the end, and we would have been fine. Because, again, there was Nintendo Power, but they didn't really cover this game start to finish. And there was no internet that I had access to in 1989. I'm sure there was some, but we certainly didn't have it at my house. So we had to have figured this out. Because I know we were the only people I know that had Monster Party. It wasn't like, when Castlevania 2 came out, and there's that part where you're supposed to kneel against the cliff to make a hurricane show up or whatever and take it to the next level. Everybody I know had Castlevania 2. Someone either looked up got the answer from a magazine or called the Nintendo tip line or maybe figured it out at random, but that was passed around among friends. Oh, here's how you get through this part.
Right.
No one else had Monster Party. I know that my brother and I had to have figured that out at some point. And we did. You stand there, you do nothing else, and eventually it melts away, which is a pretty interesting boss. Level 6, which I already talked about being kind of a difficult level, only has one boss. And that boss is interesting because the whole background of the boss looks kind of like camouflage, and it's 4 to 6 heads that are also the same color as the camouflage that move around, and you're supposed to kind of know which head, pick a head that you want to hit, and one of them will actually, take damage when you hit it. And then you just kind of have to trace this head around the room. It made it actually very difficult, but not impossible. It didn't do a lot to hurt you. You just had to kind of pay attention. I liked that these were not standard NES bosses. Not every boss was shoot it before it shoots you and dodge these shots before they hit you, or just tank through it and get make sure you have your life bar at the fullest. I liked that there were bosses in this game that took, I don't want to say a lot of skill, but at least a little bit of thought at the time, knowing that you couldn't just look on GameFAQs and get through it.
There's definitely a few, but I think saying that the vast majority of these bosses have like interesting mechanics would be doing the game way too much justice. I mean, most of these bosses, their main mechanic is just walking back and forth the room and shooting things at you, and this is definitely one of those games where you are going to have to take damage. I mean, you can't really dodge a lot of this stuff, and you might be able to with Bert. You can fly around a little bit. But there, you can't really jump over some of these guys. There's shit coming at you all the time. You really have to you're basically just a damage sponge and hope you can tank most of them, because that's really all they do. But there are a few, like the one you're just talking about. It was pretty neat to see.
Well, the levels, like I had said earlier, are pretty standard side-scrolling levels. But when you get to level 6, this is the first one that actually takes a turn where it's different. Level 6 is a haunted mansion. It has plenty of doors. I think something like 27 or 28 different doors that are actually in pairs, because they're like the Mario ghost mansions in the later Mario games. You go in one door, it teleports you through a part of the house, and you have to kind of figure out the right pathway to get to the end door. But again, because this is Monster Party, it means you've also got to find the doors that lead to any bosses you have to kill before you find the key to open that last door.
This was almost it. This is just about where my will was broken.
This was where my will was broken. I could not.
I powered through. I found out that there were only a couple more levels after this, and that's what got me back in the game. I hate this. I despise this, and I don't even like it in Mario. I don't like any time where there's the whole, go in one door, you come out this one, kind of keep track of that. Let's try this door, and I don't care for it. It always is just so time consuming, and I don't think it's I just hate it, and I hate it here especially. This was a point in the game where I was probably, I wouldn't say, if I was not fighting a boss, I was not having a good time with this one. Getting through the stages is just, the enemies, like it's been said, they walk back and forth. They also do that thing where if you exit the screen that they are on by a little bit and then walk back, they reappear. So, but going in those doors was the thrill of the game. Just going in that door, seeing what's in there, and this stage just, I didn't want any more doors by the end of this stage. It put me off walking indoors in a game where the only highlight is walking indoors.
And this was also the level, the one you're talking about, or the whole area with the doors. That's the first section of this stage. Mm-hmm. The second section, if you are not Bert, then you are in for like Metroid level of just like climbing to the top of this fucking mansion. Like it goes on and on and on. And if you're Bert, you can just fly. You don't even have to like glide your way around or anything. You can just go straight up. But if you are Bert, then you actually have to do platforming. And this is where I just could not, I could not go on. I could not get to the top of this fucking mansion. I would just die every single time.
you're talking about level 7. I there's the one that goes up more than sideways. There are parts of level 6.
So I did actually get past. Yes,
well, there are parts of level 6 where you'll find doors that you can't get to unless you can fly. But technically, you don't. It means if you're going into that door, you're going the wrong way, and you wouldn't know that. But if you're going into a door that you can't get into as Mark, then it's not the right door. I don't know how. I'm sure. Did you guys look up the solution to this, or did you actually plow through this for this?
The only thing I really looked up was the zombie thing, or the zombie dance.
Yeah, I powered through this one. I was probably just operating off pure anger at some point in time.
This is one I remembered. As I was playing it, I was like, "Oh, that's right. You go to the left here, you go to the right here." And that's I haven't played this game in forever. I mean, easily 20 years. I can't say I've played it before. After I moved out of my parents' house, and I haven't seen this game in forever. So, I was amazed at how much I remembered of exactly what to do. But it definitely, I remember being stuck in this area forever as a kid and just not trying to get through it, because the other part of this level that stinks more than the others is that for whatever reason, ectoplasm or some sort of like evil rain comes down at angles in certain rooms, and you can't avoid it. Mm-hmm. It comes fast enough that you're going to get hit by it, especially if you're coming out of a door that's right where the rain hits. Like, there's no way to avoid it. And you do take a fair amount of damage from it. So there was also, not only you lost, but every time you come through a door, everything respawns. So there's chairs that you can't avoid. They just smash into you. It's kind of like Poltergeists, a lot like that level of Splatterhouse that has all the chairs and stuff, except nowhere near as fun. Level 6 was the one where after I got to this playthrough, I thought, I wonder if Jeremy and Billy are going to just angrily quit the game and tell me to go F myself, because this level is annoying. Even though I know exactly what to do, I'm still annoyed. And there's only one actual boss there, which, again, is the reason you play this game. But thankfully, after you finish through this level, there's only 2 more. There's the tower level, which instead of going left to right, goes from bottom to top. I don't think it's necessarily that difficult, but yes, if you're Bert in that level, you can fly through screens of enemies you'd never have to face. And then you get to the last level, which is the heaven level, which is the only level in the game that I think the actual bosses are difficult. I mean, the rest of it's just a matter of making sure you don't show up at that boss's door with 1 hit point. But they aren't hard bosses. It's just either hit the things back with your bat if you're Mark, or if you're Bert, you just tank everything and just shoot over and over again until they die. But the first boss in the heaven level is this dragon that flies in circles. And even with like an almost full health bar with Bert, I couldn't kill this guy. I had to wait until I was Mark again. And just because of the way the mechanics of Mark hitting so close and being able to kind of swing faster than Mark shoots, or than Bert shoots, I was able to take this dragon guy down. But if you got to that guy, Billy, that was a rough boss fight.
That's a rough fight. And yeah, and it's a game where, like you said, for all the boss fights in this game, there is not a lot of difficulty. You're going to take damage just because I think that's just how some of the fights are set up. But you're not going to be teetering on the brink of death at any point during this game. But yeah, it's a real shock that the difficulty gets a kick right around this point.
Yeah, that boss is hard, and then this level has a bunch of they look like constellations that show up out of the sky that rain fire down on top of you, plus these candle things that fly into the screen that are fast enough that if you're not moving slowly, they're going to overwhelm you pretty quickly. The last level definitely ramps up. And then to make matters worse, you get to the very last door of the game, you unlock the door, you fight the last boss. If you don't get there with enough health or know what to do, you start at the beginning of that level all over again. It's not like you get to start at the boss. And I'm sure that we all use some save states. I'm not going to say I didn't to beat this pretty quickly. But if not, you start at the very beginning of level 8, which means you have to fight the dragon boss and the 2 other bosses till you get to the last door, and try not to get hit too many times, because you get to that boss, the last boss, and you need to have enough health there. Because the last boss, I don't know if you got to him, Jeremy, if you said you stopped at right after the mansion, but the last boss is basically this big screaming face that shoots eyeballs out of its mouth pretty fast. So if you're just Mark, it's really, really hard to hit the bat fast enough to not get hit by these eyeballs. And then you got to angle them just right so they fly up and hit this boss in his nose. If you're Bert, thankfully, you can kind of cycle the eyes so that you can do kind of this circle path, and then they kind of just follow you. It's not a big deal, and you can hit the boss a bunch. But if you don't manage to get to this boss with enough life for some mistakes, and as Bert, This boss is rough. This boss is real hard. At least I thought so. I don't know if Billy knocked him out in one shot, but I did.
Now this is a tough boss, and I made it to him. Thankfully, I made it to him as Mark, though. I was not Bert at this point. And if you've got the advantage around, it's time to hook it up. Because I stood there, I just found a spot and just continually press that button. And you've got to press that thing fast too.
Oh, so fast.
Yeah, these eyeballs, they're coming out, three in succession, and they're coming out with some speed. So yeah, I mean, you really just have to just rail on that button, and just if you're not hitting the nose there, just kind of step up just a little more. It's just about finding the right spot, and it's difficult. It's doable, but yeah, you gotta show up with at least a good plus half of the health bar if you can.
Yeah, otherwise the eyeballs just come too fast to hit consistently with your finger, and maybe the advantage can pull it off, or the max, or whatever you use. But I was doing this with a regular pad, and I was not able to do it fast enough and consistently enough to hit all these eyeballs. So you finish the last boss, and you get an ending, which I'm happy that this game has a real ending. We've talked before about Nintendo games that kind of don't have an ending, or it just says, hey, thanks for playing, or whatever. You beat the last boss, and your friend Bert gives you a box, a present to say, thanks for helping save my planet. And you go home. You open that box up at home, and a princess comes out. You're like, oh, great, there's a princess. But then the music turns dark. And the princess all of a sudden starts turning into this demon, and other demons show up. And then it shows your character that you've been playing this entire time slowly melting. And you melt while you scream. And then, of course, you wake up and, it looks like it's all a dream. No big deal. You're going to go to school the next day. But you open the door, and Bert is there. And he says, hey, let's do it again. And the game ends. Not the most terrifying ending, but you got to think back. This is Nintendo you're talking about. They didn't do blood or extreme violence. That even those Nintendo games you think of as, we just like River City Ransom or Renegade. Any game that was like a beat 'em up still wasn't bloody. It was just cartoony violent. This game actually has blood. It actually has demons. It has your character melting. There was fires and stuff everywhere. I mean, this was pretty graphic for 1989 Nintendo. So imagine getting this ending as a kid. That's what everyone, once we did beat it, we're like, we have to show everyone we know this ending. They're going to come over. We're going to have people spend the night. We're going to play this game. This ending is worth having 20 people stay at our house for. What a great ending.
I don't know how this ending didn't come up when we were doing the best endings for games.
An overthought, to be honest with you. Totally an overthought. Because it's not a satisfying, happy ending. I mean, it's interesting, and it's awesome, and it's Nintendo, how did they together? Let's go by. But is it a good ending? I don't necessarily think so.
You know what? And I'll have to tell you this. I insulted this ending the first time. I believe in a group chat.
You did. You said that it, in fact, was a pile of shit.
But let me tell you what happened. I zoned out. When he wakes up, I stopped watching, and I was like, "Fuck, another dream ending." And that guy that sent us the Super Mario question, he's off laughing at us somewhere. It's about the dream, about the ending being a dream. As soon as I saw it was a dream, I just quit. I was like, oh God. I went back and watched it one more. I went back on YouTube and watched it, and then I saw and that tacked on bit at the end. All right, I cycled through a lot of emotions during that ending. You get the gift, you take it home, you get a princess, and it's like, hey. Fucking Bert he's helped you out a little bit, and then it turns like that. And if it would have cut off right there, it would have been fine. But then you get the dream, and for a brief moment, I'll just say stick with it. For a brief moment, I was furious, and instead of looking at the screen, I instead picked up my phone and began to curse about this ending. But upon further review, seeing that it's a fake out. And that you're getting ready to go on some other adventure that Lord knows would never get financed. Yeah, this is a good ending. It's one of the, I think, I don't know. I just called it a good ending, but I can't say it's a good ending. It's an ending. It's an interesting ending. Much like everything in this game, it's something you got to see.
It's memorable. It's something you wouldn't see anywhere else. Especially, again, you got to think 1989. Now we're in a world where Resident Evil is around, and there's plenty of more graphic games. There was a game where you play as a postal worker who kills people. I mean, this is nothing compared to anything like that. But But for 1989, Nintendo, you got to figure if you're playing this game, I would have been 12 years old, 13 years old. This was amazing for what the system would actually let go, knowing that, 3 years later or whatever, we're having Mortal Kombats that are sterilized for the Nintendo products because they don't want blood and demons. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, even stuff like, the Jason game and the Freddy Krueger games, I mean, they were very just kind of whitewashed and kiddie, very cartoon-like. But leave it to Monster Party to bring the gore and the blood, because it's exactly what it did. I don't know if Nintendo was just off sleeping or they had some intern doing the Nintendo seal of quality that day, but Monster Party somehow got away with it.
Well, as we mentioned a couple times in the show, there's a lot of things in this game that seem very Japanese. I mean, there's a boss that's a wishing well that apparently is a very common or very well known in Japan, some sort of either old wives' tale or something about wishing wells. I don't know anything about it, but it was a boss that's there. There's a lot of things in the game that look very Japanese. It will surprise both of you to find out this game was never released in Japan. This game only came out in North America in 1989 and never saw the light of day in Japan.
What? What? No, it's just not possible. I mean, this is literally a game made by crazy Japanese people for crazy Japanese people. I mean, you're fighting a fucking fried shrimp, for God's sake. I mean, it's got to be for Japanese people. You don't make this for the U.S. audience. This is not what you do. I don't even understand how that could happen.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre thing. I mean, with all the imagery and like you said, the wishing well, and I didn't eat fucking fried shrimp till I was in my 20s. Back 1989 here in the United States, fried shrimp? Come on. Yeah, that is something. I don't get it. I can only assume maybe some poor Japanese fellow thought the United States knew more about world culture than they really do, which still to this day is very little.
Well, they were going to release it in Japan. It's not that it wasn't supposed to come out there. It just didn't for whatever reason. They did advertise it, but in Japan the name translates to, and this is according to the internet, so maybe the name translates to Jeremy's an idiot. But I think the name is supposed to translate to Parody World Monster Party. And in Japan, there's a bunch of bosses that are definitely bosses and regular level monsters that are definitely different graphics and are supposed to be a much clearer parody of something they would know. For example, you mentioned the Audrey 2 that says, like, hello, baby, and starts shooting bubbles at you. It honestly doesn't look like Audrey. It looks like a flower. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't necessarily know it's supposed to be Audrey 2 if you unless you watched Little Shop of Horrors a lot. But in the Japanese version of this game, Audrey has a microphone in front of her, she has a stereo speaker behind her, and she looks like Audrey. It's a different head on top of that flower pot. So it looks like Audrey too. They edited that out in this version that came out to the States because I guess they couldn't afford the licensing for all these things. So there's a good number of things in the game that the graphics in the Japanese version that was never actually released meet something else. The characters look like in the caves level, there's these things that kind of look like flying cats that scratch you. Those are supposed to be Dracula. They look just like Dracula in the Japanese version of this game that was never released, but when they came, I guess they decided they couldn't afford the rights to Universal or whoever owned it, and so they changed it to flying cats that scratch you instead of Dracula. There's a number of things that change in the game. The big thing that the internet seems to be big on is that instead of, you turn this game on at the beginning and it's that plant face and it's all green, dripping, it looks like goo. Well, of course, originally it was supposed to be blood, and there are some parts of the levels that look a little darker than they do on this release of the game. If you look online for the Japanese version of Monster Party, you can find people that have found the original version somewhere or took the time to pretend they did and then filmed, not filmed, but copied the whole thing, and you can watch it on YouTube. It's interesting to see the differences, but generally it's still the exact same game. The bosses that are reskinned still have the same attacks. The levels are the same. It doesn't change the story. It's pretty much the same game start to finish. There's just more blood than there is in this one, and some of the characters are more notably who they're supposed to be, as opposed to kind of being a version of that character to avoid copyright payment. So it's notable that it never came out in Japan. I don't know if because of that copyright issue. I have no idea, but or maybe because the sales here weren't so good. But it never came out anywhere but North America until people found this ROM in like 2011. So it now that you've played this game, knowing that it has a cult fan base, and I'm included in that. I thought Monster Party was a great game. I was very excited we were going to do it. Jeremy, do you think this game is worth playing?
I think it's worth experiencing. I mean, I think you should try it, and if you enjoy it, definitely go through it. But if you were like me, and by the end of the first stage, you were just like, "Oh man, this is going to be a rough haul for the rest of this game," it might do you better just to go watch a long play of it on YouTube or something, just to see the craziness. And I'm sure there's a good deal of reviews out there for it already, of people screaming obscenities at their TV and. But it's definitely one of the very few games for the Nintendo that I would say was a cult classic. It definitely has that feel of like something like an Evil Dead movie or one of those less popular horror films from the 80s or 90s or something that was just so bad it was good somehow. That a very small but passionate group of people really, really love. And I think Monster Party falls perfectly into that.
Yeah, this is weird because I think it's the first time I can say it is not a good game, but I would recommend you play through it. Like Jeremy said, I mean, last resort. If you can't grasp this game as far as playing through, if you think it's going to be too difficult or you just are not into it, definitely watch it. But if you can at all, don't spoil yourself. You've heard some of the bosses, but I mean, we've just scratched the surface. I mean, there's a lot of them out there, a lot of just weird, regular enemies walking around these stages, and half the fun of the game is not knowing, what is going to be on the other side of that door when you walk in. It's half the fun of it. And spoiler, a lot of times it's going to be an empty room, and you're going to be very depressed and wonder why you're still playing after you've gotten 2 or 3 of those in a row. But yeah, I think it's definitely. I think Jeremy has tossed out the word experience several times, and that's what you do with this game. And it's certainly, I mean, this Halloween, if you want to play something on the NES, you can't go wrong with this one. It does a lot of innovative things, like we talked about the stage transition, the gore in it. For a Nintendo game, there's a lot of interesting things here that you didn't see on the NES that much, or at all besides this game. There's a lot of enjoyable things here. There is enough to warrant playing through, or in the worst case, watching. But it's not a great game. It's not a good game, but it's a very special game.
You know what this game reminds me of? Are you guys familiar with ROM hacks? Where they've got Mario 420 smoke weed every day kind of stuff, and they put, they got like a joint in his mouth, or they've altered the graphics in some way. And that's what this reminds me of someone's ROM hack, that some like 13-year-old got like some programming thing where they could alter the images in old NES games and just, replaced all of the imagery in the game with crazy, stupid shit that they found. And that's exactly what this game reminds me of. But somehow it's a real game.
A 13-year-old with a great affinity for fried food.
Yes.
I think this is a very good version of, if you like bad horror movies, and I'm a huge fan of what other people would say are bad horror movies, but there are some horror movies that are bad in a good way. Campy is one way to put it, but I also like things that are so bad they're amazing. I don't think this falls in that. I think this falls in that campy category. Like, clearly, this game isn't taking itself seriously. No one in any way making this game thought this is going to be the next, serious hit. This is going to spawn off 1,000 sequels. This is going to be the next Mario. No, it was a campy, put all your favorite horror movies in one game and send a kid through it for whatever reason. But I think the mechanics of the game are fine. It's a playable game. It's not necessarily hard as long as you're a little patient in parts. I think it's a totally fine game, and especially for the purpose of, if you go back in time to 1989, if you're going to pretend you're sitting around your house at Halloween 1989, 1990, this is a great game for that purpose. I think the bosses alone, just what's in each room, makes it worth playing through this. Because you never know what they're going to throw at you next. But you know it's going to be something you haven't seen before.
It's true.
So as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, now that we've covered Monster Party, we're going to do another horror-themed episode for October this year. This time we're going to do a 16-bit Castlevania extravaganza. So there's going to be a handful of Castlevania games that were released on 16-bit systems. We're going to cover them. We're going to talk about them. We're going to say how they're different from each other, if they're better than each other, or if they all kind of take their own spin on Castlevania, a classic for monsters. I'm looking forward to that. We don't have a good listener question this week, which is okay because we're kind of recording this at a weird time. But I have to say, I know I've said this on the podcast probably every episode, but I've been selling things out of my house so that I can buy a PS4 and not get guilt for buying it. I'm selling other old video games to buy a new video game. So I am going to have, by the time the Castlevania episode airs, I will have a PS4. So I need to ask two questions. One, right. Is it worth waiting for the PS4 Pro, or should I just buy the new PS4 Slim?
From what everybody's saying right now, the only reason to own the PS4 Pro is if you actually have a 4K TV. If you do not, then you're going to be missing out on what the very large upgrade would be with the PS4 Pro, and it's just that extra fidelity in the imagery. If you just have a 1080p TV, like most of us do, I do not own any fancy things. You would, they said you would get maybe like a small graphics boost. Things would look better. Just something like that. Nothing too crazy. But as far as I can tell, if you're not rocking a 4K TV, then the PS4 Pro might not be for you unless you want that extra hard drive space, at which I think it's like a terabyte compared to the 500 gig that the Slim is.
Knowing what I like to play, I don't know if that's going to factor into it. But Billy, you have any thoughts on that?
I think I don't really see the need in it. Like Jeremy said, if you don't have a 4K TV, if you don't have the proper, the other necessary equipment to get the most out of it, I haven't even made a jump on it because I don't have the 4K TV for it. I'm perfectly content right now keeping the one I have and maybe just buying another hard drive to throw in it to expand the memory. But that 500 gigabytes, it took me a while to fill that thing up. Now it's full, and every time I want to play something new, it's a juggling act. But that didn't happen for a while, so I would say, just go with the current one or go with the Slim. The Pro, it's nice if you have the stuff for it, but that's just not a common setup in living rooms right now.
So my other question is actually, I wasn't going to have a second question on this until you talked about the PS Now. That actually sounds very interesting to me. I've never owned a PS3. There's definitely games I want to play that I've never been able to play. Demon Souls is one I've never played I want to play. I've never played the original Valkyria Chronicles, I guess. Are those on the service, or is it like only certain games at a certain time, like they're free games, or is it that you have to download all these to that hard drive, or how's this work?
Now this is gonna be the linchpin that's gonna hold it all together, or either have it all fall apart for you as far as PS Now. You're gonna have to have a pretty good internet connection. Now I don't like to pry into a man's personal business, so I don't know how the might of your connection. But you're streaming. You're streaming the games along. You don't download anything. You're just, as far as I can tell, 100%. It's like the Sega Channel of old. You go on there. They have the games listed categories, or they have alphabetically. You scroll down. I think right now it's a couple hundred games on there probably, and I think it's one of those things where I don't think they ever take anything away. If I'm incorrect, Jeremy can tell me, or if somebody can comment. But I don't think they take anything away. I think they're just slowly adding. I think the last thing, maybe a month or so ago, they added like another 15, 20 RPGs to it. I still haven't gone through the full catalog. I found a couple games I was interested in, and I'm just kind of trying to focus on one at a time. But yeah, you're streaming along the entire time. I don't know the specifications for the connection. I know you can run a test to see if it's going to work or not. But yeah, but the good thing with that is if space is going to end up being an issue for you, it's not going to take up much additional.
Well, I'm really buying it just for Persona 5 and Dark Souls 3, so I probably will not have any space issues, since everything else I play will most likely be, new games that have a retro feel. I like a lot of Metroidvanias that are in 2D. Those are never take up too much space, so I'm sure I'll have plenty of space on this thing. We've
been here with you before. We've been here. And now I just want to say that you're looking for a treat, and I sure hope you don't get a trick instead. I'm pulling for you.
But between the job situation and some other things, there's always a chance of a trick. But I think right now I'm in the best position I've been yet to actually, by next episode, have me a PS4. Right. Including my wife going out of town for a weekend where I'll be watching the kids by myself, and no one can stop me from buying one. So we'll see how that goes. But next episode, like we said, will be all Castlevanias. I know throughout this month on our Twitter account, which is at Retrovaniacs, we will be posting different vines and different kind of memories of other games throughout the years that have been horror-themed. We always have our regular articles on Retrovania.net. I'm not sure what else is coming up. I don't know if Jeremy can enlighten us there or not, but even so, there will be good. They're always good. So definitely check us out on Retrovania.net, on Twitter at Retrovaniacs. Follow us on Facebook, Retrovania.net, and we'll see you next time with a Castlevania 16-bit spectacular.